The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the grand ballroom as Kate smoothed her emerald green dress for the 100th time that evening. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate pearl necklace that had belonged to her grandmother. Tonight was supposed to be the pinnacle of her career, the moment she had worked toward for the past 5 years. The annual charity gala for the Children's Heart Foundation was not just any event, it was where the city's most influential people gathered to raise funds for critically ill children. Kate had been chosen as the event coordinator after her proposal impressed the board of directors 6 months ago. She had envisioned an evening that would break all previous fundraising records, combining elegant entertainment with heartfelt stories from families whose children had been saved by the foundation's work. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the menu featuring dishes from renowned local chefs to the auction items donated by celebrities and business leaders. But, as she stood at the edge of the ballroom watching the guests arrive in their finest attire, Kate felt the familiar weight of anxiety pressing down on her chest. She had been feeling increasingly overwhelmed in recent weeks, juggling the demands of organizing this massive event while dealing with personal struggles she had kept hidden from everyone around her. 3 months earlier, Kate had received devastating news that her father had been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease. At only 58 years old, he was already showing signs of memory loss and confusion that broke her heart every time she visited him. Her mother was struggling to cope, often calling Kate in tears, asking for help with decisions about his care and treatment options. Kate had become the family's emotional anchor while trying to maintain her professional responsibilities. The irony was not lost on her that she was organizing an event to help sick children while watching her own father slowly slip away from the man she had always known and admired. He had been her biggest supporter when she decided to pursue a career in non-profit work, even when others questioned whether she could make a decent living helping others instead of choosing a more lucrative profession. As the evening progressed, Kate moved through the crowd with practiced grace, greeting donors and ensuring everything ran smoothly. The appetizer service went perfectly, with waiters gliding between tables carrying silver trays of delicate canapés. The string quartet provided elegant background music that allowed for comfortable conversation without overwhelming the atmosphere. William Richardson stood near the bar, nursing a glass of sparkling water while observing the crowd. As the head of pediatric surgery at the city's largest hospital, he attended these events regularly, but he usually felt somewhat out of place among the wealthy socialites and business executives. His work kept him focused on medical procedures and patient care rather than small talk and networking. He had noticed Kate throughout the evening, impressed by her ability to handle multiple conversations and coordinate with staff members while maintaining a warm, genuine smile. There was something about her that caught his attention. Perhaps it was the way she took a moment to really listen when the mother of a former patient shared her story, or how she quietly directed a nervous young waiter when he seemed overwhelmed by the formal setting. William had heard about Kate's reputation in the nonprofit community. Colleagues had mentioned her innovative fundraising strategies and her ability to connect with donors on both emotional and practical levels. What impressed him most was learning that she had personally visited many of the children and families who had benefited from the foundation's work, taking time to understand their stories rather than simply organizing events from a distance. The main course was served without incident, and Kate began to relax slightly as she saw guests enjoying their meals and engaging in animated conversations about the foundation's work. The large screens around the room displayed photographs and videos of children who had received life-saving heart surgeries, their smiling faces serving as powerful reminders of why everyone had gathered that evening. During the dinner, Kate had been scheduled to give a brief presentation about the foundation's accomplishments over the past year and their goals for the future. She had rehearsed her speech dozens of times, but, as she approached the podium, she felt an unexpected wave of emotion wash over her. Looking out at the audience of nearly 300 people, she thought about her father and wondered if he would even remember this important night in her career. Her voice remained steady as she shared statistics about the number of children who had received treatment and the survival rates that had improved thanks to new equipment purchased with funds from previous galas. She introduced several families who were in attendance, including 8-year-old Maria, whose successful surgery 6 months earlier had allowed her to return to school and play with her friends for the first time in years. The audience was clearly moved by the stories, and Kate felt a sense of pride and accomplishment as she saw people reaching for their checkbooks and pledge cards. This was why she had chosen this career path, to make a tangible difference in people's lives and to help create hope where there had been despair. However, the stress of the past few months was taking its toll on Kate's physical and emotional well-being, even though she had become expert at hiding her struggles behind professional competence and a bright smile. She had been sleeping poorly, often lying awake at night worrying about her father's condition and whether she was doing enough to support her mother. She had also been skipping meals during busy days at work, surviving on coffee and determination rather than proper nutrition. The auction portion of the evening began after dinner, with items ranging from vacation packages to exclusive dining experiences with celebrity chefs. Kate worked closely with the auctioneer, providing background information about each item and encouraging bidding with stories about how the proceeds would be used. The energy in the room was electric as competitive bidding drove prices higher than expected. William found himself bidding on a weekend retreat at a mountain cabin, not because he particularly needed a vacation but because he wanted to support the cause and he had been impressed by Kate's presentation. He ended up winning the package after a friendly bidding war with a local business owner, and he made a mental note to perhaps invite some of the medical residents to join him for a weekend of relaxation and informal mentoring. As the evening continued, Kate began to feel increasingly lightheaded and dizzy. She attributed it to the excitement and adrenaline of the event, along with the fact that she had barely eaten anything all day due to nerves and last-minute preparations. She had been so focused on ensuring that everything went perfectly for the guests that she had neglected to take care of her own basic needs. The final auction item was a luxury cruise for two, donated by a local travel agency. As the bidding reached higher levels, Kate felt the room spinning slightly around her. She gripped the edge of the podium where she was standing next to the auctioneer, trying to steady herself and hoping that no one would notice her discomfort. William had been watching Kate throughout the evening and had begun to notice subtle signs that she might be struggling. As a doctor, he was trained to observe people carefully and pick up on physical cues that others might miss. He saw how she occasionally placed her hand on her forehead as if dealing with a headache, and how she seemed to sway slightly when she thought no one was looking. The cruise auction concluded successfully with a winning bid of $12,000, bringing the evening's total fundraising to nearly $500,000, far exceeding Kate's most optimistic projections. The audience erupted in applause, celebrating not just the successful bid but the overall success of the evening and the impact their generosity would have on children's lives. Kate should have felt triumphant and relieved that everything had gone according to plan, but instead she felt increasingly weak and disoriented. The combination of stress, lack of food, emotional exhaustion, and the physical demands of coordinating such a large event had pushed her body beyond its limits. As the guests began to move from their tables toward the dance floor where a jazz band was setting up for the final portion of the evening, Kate stepped away from the podium and tried to make her way discreetly toward the back of the room. She needed just a few minutes to collect herself, maybe get some fresh air and a glass of water before the dancing began. But, as she walked across the marble floor in her high heels, Kate felt her vision becoming blurry and her legs growing weak beneath her. The sounds of conversation and laughter seemed to fade into the distance, and she realized with growing alarm that she was about to collapse in front of 300 people at the most important event of her professional life. William had been moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations from colleagues and donors who recognized him from the hospital. But his attention was drawn to Kate as he noticed her unsteady movement toward the back of the room. Something about her posture and the pale color of her face triggered his medical instincts, and he began moving in her direction. The moment Kate felt her knees buckle and knew she could no longer maintain her composure, William was already stepping forward. Years of emergency room experience had taught him to react quickly in crisis situations, and he moved with the swift confidence of someone accustomed to helping people in their most vulnerable moments. Kate's last conscious thought before everything went black was a mixture of embarrassment and gratitude as she felt strong arms catching her before she could hit the floor. The carefully orchestrated evening that she had worked so hard to perfect was ending with her becoming the center of attention in a way she had never intended. William caught Kate just as she began to fall, supporting her weight and quickly assessing her condition while trying to draw as little attention as possible to the situation. His medical training kicked in immediately as he checked her pulse and breathing while gently lowering her to a nearby chair that someone had quickly provided. The evening that had begun with such promise and had proceeded so successfully was ending with Kate unconscious in the arms of a man she barely knew, surrounded by concerned guests who had no idea about the personal struggles and physical exhaustion that had brought her to this moment of complete vulnerability. The first thing Kate became aware of was the soft murmur of concerned voices and the feeling of cool air against her face. As consciousness slowly returned, she found herself lying on a plush velvet sofa in what appeared to be a small office adjacent to the ballroom. Her head was resting on a silk cushion, and someone had loosened the clasp of her pearl necklace to help her breathe more easily. William was kneeling beside the sofa, his experienced fingers gently checking her pulse while speaking in quiet, reassuring tones to the small group of people who had gathered around them. Kate could hear him asking someone to bring water and requesting that the crowd be given space to allow for proper air circulation. Take your time, William said softly when he noticed Kate's eyes beginning to focus. You're safe now. I'm Dr. Richardson, and you've just had a fainting episode, but your vital signs are stable. Kate tried to sit up immediately, her professional instincts kicking in as she remembered the gala and her responsibilities to the guests and the foundation. The event, she whispered, her voice hoarse. I need to make sure everything is still running smoothly. The donors are expecting. The event is fine, William assured her, placing a gentle but firm hand on her shoulder to prevent her from rising too quickly. Your team has everything under control. Right now, the most important thing is making sure you're okay. The office door opened, and Margaret Foster, the Foundation's board president, entered carrying a glass of water and looking deeply concerned. Margaret was a distinguished woman in her 60s who had become something of a mentor to Kate over the years, and the worry in her eyes was evident as she approached the sofa. Kate, dear, you gave us quite a scare, Margaret said, settling into a nearby chair. Dr. Richardson was fortunately nearby when you collapsed, and he's been taking excellent care of you. But I think we need to have a serious conversation about what led to this. Kate accepted the water gratefully, her hands still trembling slightly as she took small sips. The cool liquid helped clear some of the fog from her mind, but she was acutely aware of how weak and disoriented she still felt. The embarrassment of collapsing at such a crucial moment was almost overwhelming, and she found herself fighting back tears of frustration and shame. I'm so sorry, Kate began, her voice breaking slightly. This was supposed to be perfect evening, and I've ruined everything. The donors must think we can't even take care of our own staff, let alone manage their contributions properly. William exchanged a meaningful look with Margaret before speaking. Kate, I've been observing you throughout the evening, and what I saw was someone who put everything she had into making this event successful. Sometimes our bodies force us to rest when we've been pushing ourselves too hard for too long. Margaret nodded in agreement. The evening was absolutely magnificent, Kate. The fundraising totals exceeded our wildest expectations, and every single person in that ballroom was talking about how moved they were by your presentation. One small medical emergency doesn't erase the incredible work you've done. But Kate wasn't easily consoled. The perfectionist tendencies that had driven her success in nonprofit work were now amplifying her sense of failure and inadequacy. She had always prided herself on being reliable and competent, someone who could handle any challenge that came her way. Collapsing in front of 300 people felt like a fundamental betrayal of the professional image she had worked so hard to cultivate. William could see the internal struggle playing out across Kate's face, and his medical experience had taught him to recognize the signs of someone who habitually put everyone else's needs before their own. When was the last time you ate a proper meal? He asked gently. Kate had to think for a moment before answering. I had coffee and a piece of toast this morning. And maybe some crackers around noon while I was reviewing the seating arrangements with the catering staff. And how much sleep have you been getting lately? William continued his informal assessment. Enough, Kate replied defensively, though the dark circles under her eyes told a different story. I've been staying up late to finalize details for tonight, but that's normal for event planning. Once everything was finished, I planned to take some time off and rest. Margaret leaned forward in her chair, her expression becoming more serious. Kate, I've been in nonprofit work for 30 years, and I've seen too many dedicated people burn themselves out because they felt they had to carry the entire weight of the organization on their shoulders. What Dr. Richardson is describing sounds like classic symptoms of exhaustion and stress. William nodded in agreement. Your body was sending you signals that you needed to slow down, but you were probably too busy taking care of everyone else to pay attention to them. Fainting is often the body's way of forcing us to rest when we won't do it voluntarily. The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the office door. Kate's assistant, Jennifer, peered inside with an update from the main ballroom. The jazz band has started playing, and people are dancing and mingling beautifully. Several donors have asked about you, and I've been telling them that you're receiving medical attention but that everything is under control. Kate felt a wave of relief knowing that the event was continuing successfully without her direct oversight, but she also experienced a strange sense of displacement. For months, every aspect of the gala had revolved around her decisions and her presence. Learning that things could proceed smoothly without her was both reassuring and somehow unsettling. Thank you, Jennifer, Kate said. Please make sure to thank everyone for their patience and understanding. And make sure Dr. Richardson's contribution is properly acknowledged, both his auction purchase and his assistance tonight." After Jennifer left, William sat down in a chair across from Kate, his demeanor shifting from immediate medical concern to something more personal and empathetic. "I have to ask you something, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way. Is there something else going on in your life that might be contributing to your stress levels? In my experience, it usually takes more than just work pressure to push someone to the point of physical collapse." Kate hesitated, not accustomed to sharing personal information with relative strangers, especially someone as accomplished and respected as Dr. Richardson. But something about his calm presence and genuine concern made her feel safe enough to open up about the struggles she had been keeping to herself. "My father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease 3 months ago," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's only 58, and the progression has been faster than anyone expected. My mother is having a really difficult time coping, and I've been trying to help coordinate his care while managing my work responsibilities." Margaret reached over and took Kate's hand, squeezing it gently. "Oh, honey, why didn't you tell us? The board would have been more than happy to provide additional support or adjust your workload during this difficult time." "I didn't want anyone to think I couldn't handle my job," Kate replied, tears finally beginning to flow down her cheeks. "This gala was so important, and I knew how much was riding on its success. I thought if I could just get through tonight, I could deal with everything else afterward." William's expression softened with understanding and compassion. As a doctor who dealt with families facing serious illnesses every day, he was intimately familiar with the emotional and physical toll that watching a loved one suffer could take on caregivers. Alzheimer's is one of the most challenging diseases for families to navigate, especially when it affects someone relatively young. The sense of loss and helplessness can be overwhelming. "He was my hero growing up," Kate continued, the words pouring out now that she had begun to share her burden. "He taught me about integrity and compassion and the importance of helping others. Watching him struggle to remember my name or get confused about where he is, it's like losing him piece by piece, every single day." Margaret and William sat quietly, allowing Kate to express the emotions she had been suppressing for months. Sometimes the most helpful thing medical professionals and friends could offer was simply the space for someone to be vulnerable and honest about their pain. "I keep thinking that if I work hard enough and accomplish enough good things, maybe somehow it will balance out the unfairness of what's happening to him," Kate admitted. "I know it doesn't make logical sense, but focusing on the foundation and tonight's event gave me something I could control when everything else felt like it was falling apart." William leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle but firm. "Kate, you've created an evening that will directly impact the lives of dozens of children and their families. The work you do matters enormously, and your father would be incredibly proud of what you've accomplished. But none of that changes the fact that you're dealing with an incredibly difficult situation, and you need support. Have you been getting any help for yourself during this time?" Margaret asked. "Counseling, support groups, anything to help you process what you're going through?" Kate shook her head. "I've been so focused on researching treatment options and helping my mother that I haven't really thought about what I might need. Besides, I'm not the one who's sick. But you are the one who's trying to hold everyone else together while your world is being turned upside down," William pointed out. "Caregiver burnout is a very real medical condition, and what happened tonight could be your body's way of telling you that you need to take care of yourself too." The three of them sat in comfortable silence for several minutes, the sounds of music and laughter from the main ballroom providing a distant soundtrack to their quiet conversation. Kate felt simultaneously exhausted and oddly relieved to have finally shared the weight she had been carrying alone for so long. Margaret broke the silence first. "Kate, I want you to take the rest of this week off. And I don't want to hear any arguments about deadlines or follow-up work from tonight's event. Jennifer and the rest of the team are perfectly capable of handling the details. But the thank you letters to donors need to go out within 48 hours, Kate protested weakly. And we need to process all the auction payments and pledge commitments before people change their minds or forget what they committed to." "All of that will be taken care of," Margaret assured her. "Your job right now is to rest and to start thinking about what kind of support you need to deal with everything you're facing. The foundation is here to support you just as much as you've supported us." William stood up and moved to check Kate's pulse and blood pressure one more time, satisfied that her vital signs had returned to normal ranges. "From a medical standpoint, I think you're going to be fine with some rest and proper nutrition. But I'd like to recommend that you see your primary care physician within the next few days for a more thorough evaluation. I don't really have a regular doctor, Kate admitted. I've been meaning to find one since I moved to the city, but I never seem to have time for routine appointments. That's something we definitely need to address, William said with a slight smile. Taking care of your health isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, especially when you're dealing with high levels of stress. I'd be happy to recommend some excellent physicians who understand the demands of nonprofit work. Kate found herself looking at William with new appreciation and curiosity. Throughout the crisis, he had managed to be both professionally competent and personally caring, treating her not just as a medical emergency but as a whole person dealing with complex challenges. There was something about his calm confidence and genuine empathy that made her feel safe and understood in a way she hadn't experienced in months. As the evening in the office continued, Kate began to realize that her collapse might actually have been a gift in disguise, forcing her to confront the unsustainable pace she had been maintaining and connecting her with people who genuinely wanted to help her find a healthier balance in her life. 3 days after the gala, Kate found herself sitting in the waiting room of Dr. Sarah Chen's medical practice, nervously flipping through a magazine without actually reading any of the articles. William had recommended Dr. Chen as someone who specialized in stress-related health issues and had experience working with healthcare professionals and nonprofit workers who often neglected their own well-being. The appointment had been Margaret's idea, but Kate had agreed after spending 2 days sleeping more than she had in months and realizing just how exhausted she truly was. The forced rest had given her time to think about William's words and to acknowledge that the fainting episode had been her body's way of demanding attention she had been refusing to give it. Kate's phone buzzed with a text message from her mother. "Dad had a good morning today. He remembered your name and asked about the charity event. Maybe we could visit this weekend?" The message brought both joy and sadness, as these moments of clarity had become increasingly rare and precious over the past few months. When Dr. Chen called Kate into her office, she was struck by the physician's warm but no-nonsense demeanor. Dr. Chen was a petite woman in her 40s who had clearly learned how to balance compassion with practical medical advice. Her office was decorated with certificates and awards, but also with photographs of patients who had successfully overcome various health challenges. "Dr. Richardson gave me some background about what happened at your event," Dr. Chen began after completing a thorough physical examination. "He was concerned that you might be experiencing chronic stress that's manifesting in physical symptoms. Tell me about what's been happening in your life lately." Kate found herself opening up more easily than she had expected, perhaps because the past few days of rest had given her some emotional distance from the constant pressure she had been feeling. She talked about her father's diagnosis, her mother's struggles, the demands of coordinating the gala, and the way she had been pushing herself to maintain perfect performance in all areas of her life. "It sounds like you've been trying to be everything to everyone while completely neglecting yourself," Dr. Chen observed. "That's a pattern I see frequently in people who work in caring professions. You're so focused on helping others that you forget you're human too." The blood tests and other examinations revealed that Kate was indeed suffering from chronic stress, mild dehydration, and nutritional deficiencies that were affecting her energy levels and cognitive function. Dr. Chen explained that while none of these issues were immediately dangerous, they could lead to more serious health problems if left untreated. "The good news is that everything I'm seeing is reversible with some lifestyle changes and attention to self-care," Dr. Chen said. "The challenging news is that those changes will require you to fundamentally shift how you approach your responsibilities and relationships." Kate left the appointment with a prescription for vitamin supplements, a referral to a therapist who specialized in grief counseling and caregiver stress, and a detailed plan for gradually rebuilding her physical and emotional reserves. She also had Dr. Chen's business card with her personal cell phone number, along with instructions to call immediately if she experienced any concerning symptoms. As Kate walked to her car, she was surprised to see William sitting on a bench outside the medical building, reading what appeared to be a medical journal. When he noticed her approaching, he stood up with a slightly sheepish expression. "I hope you don't mind," William said. "I was finishing up some consultations in the building, and I thought I might run into you. I wanted to check how you were feeling and see if Dr. Chen was helpful." Kate felt a flutter of something she couldn't quite identify, gratitude mixed with curiosity about why this accomplished surgeon was taking such a personal interest in her well-being. "She was wonderful, actually. Very thorough and practical. Thank you for the recommendation. Would you like to grab some coffee?" William asked, gesturing toward a small cafe across the street. "I mean, if you have time and energy for it. I know you're supposed to be resting." Kate surprised herself by saying yes. She had been dreading going home to an empty apartment where she would have nothing to distract her from worrying about her father or analyzing every detail of the gala. The prospect of conversation with someone who seemed genuinely interested in her well-being was appealing. The cafe was quiet in the late afternoon, with only a few other customers scattered at small tables near the windows. William ordered a regular coffee while Kate chose herbal tea, following Dr. Chen's advice to reduce her caffeine intake. They found a table in a corner where they could talk without being overheard. "I have a confession to make," William said once they were settled. "I've been thinking about you quite a bit since Saturday night. Not just from a medical perspective, but because I was genuinely impressed by your dedication and the impact you're having through your work." Kate felt herself blushing slightly, not accustomed to such direct praise from someone she barely knew. "I'm not sure collapsing at my own event qualifies as impressive. The fact that you pushed yourself to that point because you cared so deeply about the outcome is actually exactly what I found impressive," William replied. "In my line of work, I see a lot of people who are motivated by money or prestige. It's refreshing to meet someone who's willing to sacrifice for something she believes in." They talked for nearly 2 hours, covering topics ranging from their respective career paths to their shared concerns about the healthcare system and their observations about human nature. Kate learned that William had chosen pediatric surgery specifically because he wanted to help children have the chance to grow up and live full lives. He had turned down more lucrative offers from private practices to continue working at the public hospital where he could treat patients regardless of their family's ability to pay. William, in turn, was fascinated by Kate's journey from studying business in college to discovering her passion for nonprofit work during a volunteer experience at a homeless shelter. He admired the way she had been willing to take a significant pay cut and give up conventional markers of success in order to do work that felt meaningful to her. "Can I ask you something personal?" Kate said as their conversation began to wind down. "Why are you being so kind to me? I mean, you barely know me, and you're a busy surgeon. You could have just made sure I was medically stable and moved on with your evening." William was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider how to answer honestly without making Kate uncomfortable. "I guess I recognized something in you that reminded me of myself a few years ago. I went through a period where I was working 100-hour weeks and completely neglecting everything else in my life because I thought that was what being dedicated meant." "What changed?" Kate asked. "I ended up in the emergency room myself after collapsing during a 14-hour surgery," William admitted. "It turned out I had been ignoring chest pains for weeks because I didn't want to appear weak or unreliable. The cardiologist who treated me told me that I wouldn't be helping anyone if I worked myself to death before I turned 40. Kate was struck by the parallel between their experiences and the realization that someone as accomplished and respected as William had faced similar struggles with finding balance. "How did you learn to take better care of yourself?" "It was a gradual process that involved accepting help from colleagues, setting boundaries, and recognizing that taking care of myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary for me to be effective in taking care of others," William explained. "I also had to learn that being vulnerable and asking for support actually made me a better doctor, not a weaker one." As they prepared to leave the cafe, William hesitated before speaking again. "I hope this doesn't sound presumptuous, but I wondered if you might be interested in having dinner sometime. Not as a doctor checking up on a patient, but as two people who seem to enjoy each other's company." Kate felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. It had been over a year since she had been on a date, having been too focused on work and family responsibilities to pursue romantic relationships. But there was something about William's straightforward honesty and genuine care that made her want to say yes. "I would like that," Kate replied. "But I should probably warn you that my life is pretty complicated right now. Between dealing with my father's illness and trying to establish healthier work habits, I'm not sure how much emotional energy I have for dating." "I appreciate your honesty," William said with a smile. "And I think starting as friends who support each other through difficult times might be exactly what we both need right now." They exchanged phone numbers, and William walked Kate to her car, making sure she felt steady and alert enough to drive safely. As Kate drove home, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just a few days. The crisis that had seemed like a professional disaster was beginning to feel like an opportunity to build the kind of life she actually wanted rather than the one she felt obligated to maintain. That evening, Kate called her mother to check on her father and to share some of what she had learned from Dr. Chen about managing caregiver stress. For the first time in months, the conversation didn't leave Kate feeling overwhelmed and helpless. Instead, she felt like she was beginning to develop tools and perspectives that might help both her and her mother navigate the challenges ahead. Before going to bed, Kate found herself thinking about William and their conversation at the cafe. She was intrigued by the possibility of developing a relationship with someone who understood the demands of meaningful work and who had faced his own struggles with finding balance. The idea of having a partner who could offer support and understanding rather than additional obligations was both appealing and slightly frightening. Kate also thought about the therapy appointment Dr. Chen had scheduled for her the following week. She had never considered counseling before, having always prided herself on being able to handle whatever challenges came her way. But the events of the past few days had shown her that there was a difference between handling things and actually processing and healing from them. As she drifted off to sleep, Kate felt something she hadn't experienced in months, a sense of hope about the future and curiosity about what positive changes might be possible in her life. The collapse at the gala had forced her to confront unsustainable patterns, but it had also connected her with people who wanted to help her build something better. The next morning brought a call from Jennifer with updates about the gala's aftermath. The final fundraising total had reached $600,000, the highest amount in the foundation's history. More importantly, several major donors had already committed to ongoing support for the next year, indicating that the event had accomplished its goal of building long-term relationships rather than just raising money for a single evening. Kate felt proud of what had been accomplished, but, for the first time in her career, she also felt capable of celebrating success without immediately moving on to the next overwhelming challenge. Dr. Chen's advice about learning to acknowledge and enjoy achievements was already beginning to influence how she thought about her work and her life. 6 months after the gala, Kate stood in her father's garden watching him carefully tend to the tomato plants they had planted together during one of his clearer days. The afternoon sun cast gentle shadows across the yard, and she could hear her mother humming softly as she prepared lunch in the kitchen. It was one of those precious moments when her father seemed almost like his old self, focused and purposeful as he examined each plant for signs of growth. The months since her collapse had brought significant changes to every aspect of Kate's life. The weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez had helped her understand that her tendency to overcommit and neglect her own needs stemmed from a deep-seated belief that her worth was tied to how much she could accomplish for others. Learning to recognize and challenge those patterns had been difficult but transformative work. "The tomatoes are coming along beautifully this year," her father said, looking up at Kate with clear eyes. "Do you remember when you were little and you insisted on planting the seeds upside down because you thought they would grow faster that way?" Kate smiled at the memory, treasuring these moments when her father could access stories from the past with clarity and warmth. "I was convinced that if roots grew down, then planting them upside down would make them grow up twice as fast. You let me try it with half the garden. And, when nothing sprouted, you were so disappointed that I had to explain the difference between creative thinking and understanding how things actually work," her father continued. "But I was proud that you wanted to find a better way to help things grow." These glimpses of her father's personality and memory had become more sporadic over the months, but Kate had learned from her therapy sessions and support group meetings that each moment of connection was a gift to be appreciated rather than a reminder of what was being lost. Dr. Martinez had helped her understand that grief could coexist with gratitude, and that accepting the reality of her father's condition didn't mean giving up hope for meaningful moments together. Kate's phone buzzed with a text from William. "Surgery finished early. Would you like to meet for lunch before you head back to the city?" She smiled as she typed back her response, still sometimes amazed by how naturally their friendship had evolved into something deeper and more supportive than either of them had initially expected. Their first official dinner date had taken place 3 weeks after their coffee conversation, and it had been refreshingly different from any dating experience Kate had previously had. Instead of the usual awkward small talk and attempts to impress each other, they had found themselves having serious conversations about their work, their values, and their experiences with loss and healing. William had shared stories about patients whose courage had inspired him, while Kate had talked about donors whose generosity had restored her faith in human goodness. What had surprised Kate most about developing feelings for William was how safe and accepted she felt when she was with him. He had been present and supportive during some of her most difficult days dealing with her father's declining health, but he had never tried to fix her problems or offer solutions unless she specifically asked for advice. Instead, he had simply listened and provided the kind of steady, reliable presence that allowed her to process her emotions without judgment. Kate had also been surprised to discover how much she enjoyed supporting William through his own challenges. His work as a pediatric surgeon involved making life-and-death decisions regularly, and he sometimes struggled with cases where his medical expertise wasn't enough to save a child's life. Kate had learned to recognize the signs when William was dealing with a particularly difficult case, and she had developed ways to offer comfort and perspective that helped him process the weight of his responsibilities. "Are you heading back to work today?" her father asked as they finished examining the garden and began walking toward the house. "I'm meeting William for lunch, and then I have a planning meeting for next month's volunteer appreciation event," Kate replied. "But nothing too stressful. Margaret and the board have been very supportive about helping me maintain better boundaries." The changes in Kate's work life had been gradual but significant. With Margaret's encouragement and the support of the Foundation's board, Kate had hired an additional staff member to help with event coordination and donor relations. This had allowed her to focus more on the strategic and creative aspects of fundraising while delegating many of the detail-oriented tasks that had previously consumed most of her time and energy. Kate had also implemented new policies for herself around work hours, vacation time, and emergency availability. She had learned to say no to projects and commitments that would stretch her too thin, and she had become more selective about which evening and weekend events truly required her personal attendance. The Foundation's work was still deeply meaningful to her, but she had discovered that she could be more effective when she wasn't constantly exhausted and overwhelmed. "This William you keep mentioning," her father said with a slight smile, "he sounds like someone who makes you happy. Your mother has been hoping we might meet him soon." Kate felt a warmth in her chest at her father's observation. Even with his declining memory, he had somehow picked up on the significance of William in her life. "I think you would like him, Dad. He's kind and intelligent, and he cares about helping people the way you taught me to care." They found Kate's mother in the kitchen putting the finishing touches on a lunch of grilled chicken salad and fresh bread. The three of them sat around the same table where Kate had eaten thousands of meals growing up, and she was struck by how different these family gatherings felt now compared to the desperate, grief-filled visits of several months earlier. The support group for families dealing with Alzheimer's had been crucial in helping Kate and her mother learn new ways to connect with her father and find joy in their time together despite the progression of his illness. Instead of constantly mourning the conversations they could no longer have, they had learned to appreciate the experiences that were still possible and to create new traditions that worked within the reality of his current capabilities. "Mom, William and I were talking about maybe planning a small dinner party here sometime soon," Kate said as they ate. "Nothing overwhelming, just a few close friends and family members. William has been curious about Dad's woodworking, and I thought maybe they could look at some of his projects together." Kate's mother brightened at the suggestion. "I think that would be wonderful. Your father always enjoys showing his work to people who appreciate craftsmanship. And I would love to meet this young man who has brought such a sparkle to your eyes." After lunch, Kate drove to meet William at a small restaurant near the hospital where he worked. She found him at a corner table, still wearing his scrubs and looking tired but genuinely pleased to see her. The sight of him always brought a sense of calm and happiness that Kate was still learning to trust and accept. "How was your morning?" Kate asked as she settled into the chair across from him. "Challenging but successful," William replied. "We had a 7-year-old with a complex heart defect, and the surgery went better than expected. She should be able to live a completely normal life once she recovers. Days like this remind me why I chose this specialty." Kate reached across the table and squeezed his hand, understanding both the satisfaction and the emotional weight that came with William's work. Over the months, she had learned that one of the most meaningful things she could offer him was simply witnessing and acknowledging the impact of what he did every day. "How was your visit with your parents?" William asked. "Really good, actually," Kate replied. "Dad was having a clear day, and we worked in the garden together. He even made jokes and told stories about when I was little. Those moments are becoming more precious because they're less frequent, but I'm learning to really appreciate them instead of spending the whole time worrying about when they'll end." William nodded with understanding. His medical training had taught him about the progression of Alzheimer's disease, but getting to know Kate and her family had given him a much deeper appreciation for the human experience of watching someone you love struggle with memory loss and confusion. "I've been thinking about our conversation last week," William said, "about the possibility of moving in together. Have you given it any more thought?" Kate had indeed been thinking about William's suggestion that they find a place to share. Their relationship had deepened significantly over the months, and they had reached a point where spending time apart felt unnatural and unnecessary. But Kate had wanted to be careful not to make major life decisions while she was still learning to manage stress and establish healthier boundaries in all areas of her life. "I talked to Dr. Martinez about it during my session yesterday," Kate said. She pointed out that one of the things I've learned over the past few months is the difference between making decisions based on fear and making decisions based on what I actually want and need. William waited patiently for Kate to continue, giving her space to work through her thoughts without pressure or urgency. This kind of respectful attention had become one of the things Kate valued most about their relationship. I realized that the only reason I've been hesitating is because I'm afraid of depending on someone else after spending so many years thinking I had to handle everything alone, Kate continued. But what we have doesn't feel like dependence. It feels like partnership and mutual support. A smile spread across William's face as he understood what Kate was saying. So is that a yes to looking at apartments together? It's a yes to building a life together, Kate replied. I love you, William. I love how safe and accepted you make me feel, and I love the way we support each other through difficult things. I want to wake up next to you and come home to you and plan a future together. William leaned across the table and kissed her gently, both of them aware that they were marking an important moment in their relationship. After months of gradual building of trust and intimacy, they were making a commitment to share their lives in a deeper and more intentional way. As they left the restaurant together, Kate reflected on how dramatically her life had changed since the night she had collapsed at the gala. What had seemed like a humiliating professional failure had actually been the beginning of the most growth and healing she had ever experienced. She had learned to ask for help, to set boundaries, to appreciate small moments of joy, and to accept love and support from others. The work with the foundation continued to be meaningful and fulfilling, but it was no longer the only source of purpose and identity in Kate's life. She had discovered that taking care of herself and building healthy relationships actually made her more effective in her professional work, not less committed to helping others. Walking hand in hand with William toward his car, Kate felt a deep sense of gratitude for the unexpected ways that crisis and vulnerability had led to connection and growth. The future still held challenges and uncertainties, particularly regarding her father's health and the demanding nature of both their careers. But she felt equipped with tools and support systems that would help her navigate whatever difficulties arose. That evening, as Kate and William began looking at apartment listings on his laptop, Kate's phone rang with a call from Margaret. The foundation had just received notification that they had been selected to receive a $1 million grant from a national healthcare foundation, largely based on the success of the previous year's gala and the innovative programs Kate had developed. This is incredible, Kate, Margaret said, her voice filled with excitement. This grant will allow us to expand our services to reach twice as many families next year. The review committee specifically mentioned your leadership and vision as factors in their decision. Kate felt a surge of pride and satisfaction at the news, but she also noticed how different her reaction was compared to how she might have responded 6 months earlier. Instead of immediately thinking about all the additional work and responsibility the grant would require, she found herself focusing on the impact it would have on children and families who needed help. That's wonderful news, Margaret, Kate replied. Let's schedule a meeting next week to start planning how to implement the expanded programs in a sustainable way. And let's make sure we involve the entire team in developing the timeline so we don't end up overwhelmed. After ending the call, Kate shared the news with William, who immediately understood the significance of the recognition and funding for Kate's professional work. They spent the rest of the evening talking about how this new opportunity might fit into their plans for shared living arrangements and long-term goals. As Kate prepared for bed that night, she thought about the journey from collapse to recovery to growth that had brought her to this point. She had learned that true strength came not from being able to handle everything alone, but from building the wisdom and courage to create sustainable, supportive ways of living and working. The woman who had crumpled during the banquet had been carrying burdens that were too heavy for one person to bear. The woman who was planning a future with someone she loved had learned that sharing those burdens didn't make her weak, it made her human, and it made her capable of helping others from a place of health and wholeness rather than depletion and desperation. Kate fell asleep that night feeling grateful for the moment of crisis that had forced her to rebuild her life on a foundation of self-care, authentic relationships, and sustainable purpose. Sometimes the most important growth came not from success and achievement, but from learning how to fall safely and how to accept the hands that reached out to catch you when you needed support the most.